Okay. Hello, my friends. We have got guest department as well. This is the first session of Import and Export Operations course seminar series. And thanks to Ozan Hocam, we organized a seminar series on Tuesdays, and every Tuesday from beginning from this week till the end of the semester, you will have guests. We will have guests from professional expertise area. And today we have got a very distinguished guest from Minister of Trade and Industry and Technology, Dr. Kaan. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. And he will lecture us international payment methods this week. Next week, arbitration and market segmentation, as remember. So we will have 2 weeks of training from him. His area of expertise is trade, but majority in finance and statistics, as I learned. So with your applause, I'm inviting him to the stage, and stage is yours, Dr.
Thank you very much. Hello, my friends. My name is Kaan Karademir. As I said before, it is stated before, I work at Industry and Technology Ministry of Turkey. And I had business administration doctorate on the area. And I have give some lectures for the students as you at the Gazi University as well. And today we will start a topic about international payment methods. And when we talk about international payment methods and the internationality, of course, there are some risks about these payment methods, as I mean that the currency or the foreign exchange risks. So let's begin with the outline. In the international area, there is not so much different payment methods, and some of them are written on the presentation, and these are the most common methods which are used in the international trades. I want to, this course going to be interactive. If you have some questions come up mind, you can ask with bravery. Of course. Have you ever think, are you all the international trade students, or there are some business administration students? But this question is so familiar to all of you. Why do you think that there are lots of international payment methods? Do you have an idea about that? Or is any one of you want to answer these questions? Why there are lots of payment methods? Why don't we use just cash in the international trade or in trade industry? Let me try to explain you if you don't want to answer. Of course, maybe you are going to be heat up and ask questions as going on the lecture. When we talk about internationality or when we talk about the trade, if we have just one payment method, there are going to be some lack of transactions or lack of trade on the market, because not every entrepreneurs or traders, seller, buyers, who are they, don't have cash in their pockets. So they need to take some different payment methods to keep going on their activities on the market. That's why we have more than one as cash, more than one international payment methods or just payment methods in the trade area. And international trade payment methods, one of them is cash advance, one of them is letter of credit, which is more common in the sector, documentary collections, open account, and which is not so familiar and not used so much, but credit, the consignment, is one of the payment methods. And when we talk about these payment methods, we always keep it in our mind. There are some currency, foreign exchange risks, so we must evaluate these risks and try to find the best payment method for our operations in the market. It is so similar to domestic trades, but the letter of credit is not used in the country risks, political risks, economic risks, and market risks they have. As I said, that there is 5 common term of payment, and there are some absolute and relative risks for the side of these payment methods for the buyers, sellers, importers, and exporters. What are the key factors to determining the best international payment option is relations between the seller and the buyer. What I mean that in the trade sector or in the trade discipline, you do not always know who are selling the goods or services, and also the buyer do not know who are the sellers, and in basically face-to-face or individually. So the relationship between sellers and buyers are really important, because when your first transactions happen in the market, it is something different, but there are some regular transactions between the seller and buyers. It means that you have some different payment methods can be used in the market between these sellers and buyers. And of course, nature of the merchandise is the key factor. I mean that you are selling marbles, the big stones, or just the small pans. Also, it depends on the sector, so the payment methods can be changed for the merchandise nature. Also, industry norms are different. For example, in the energy markets, there are no cash advance payments in international trade. Most probably, nearly all of the payment methods are letter of credits are used in the industry of energy. So the industry norms are really important to determine which international payment method is going to happen on the market. Of course, distance between the seller and buyer is important, because when we talk about international trade, there are lots of countries in the world. So when you sell something to the China, it is very far away from here, it's different. When you sell something to the Bulgaria, Greece, is different, because when we talk about distance, there are some time to take, the delivery is going to be taken by the buyers. So this time period is really crucial for the international payment methods, because when we talk about the time in the payments, the currency or the foreign exchange risks, also there are some different risks on the market, has to be considered before, okay? Of course, the currency fluctuations and political and economic stability is also important while we are trying to find international payment methods. These key factors are really basic, and all you can think by yourself when you think about international markets. So the international payment methods are determined by these kind of factors, okay? So let's start the most familiar one, cash in advance. It is not very common. Do you have any idea why it is not very common? For example, in daily lives, do you directly send your money to someone who are selling any good or service to you? You always want to be sure that the good or service has to be taken by yourself, right? Because you do not know the seller, you do not know get reached the good or services from him or her, or who is that. So cash in advance is not very familiar use in the international market as well as the domestic trade. Used in new relationship, it is a conflict, as you can think that, not very common, because we do not know the seller or the buyer, but used in new relationship. It means that when we want to construct a trust between the seller and buyers, and we are sure that the seller is put all the effort to get the goods and services to us, we can use cash advance in the first stage of the trade. It is going to be really trust for both sides, so the use in new relationship is common. Provide great security for the seller, because why? Seller take all the money and also have the goods and services, not give them to the seller yet, buyer yet. The buyer simply prepays the cash in front and prior to the shipment. And the good and risks that seller will not comply with all the terms of contract. Also buyers has high level of confidence in ability and willingness to the seller, because if you do not have this confidence, we do not use cash in advance. The transactions are really small, not so much money we are talking about in cash in advance. And sometimes buyer has no choice. They need that good or service immediately, and that specific good or service, so they can use to reach the good and services directly by cash in advance. Yes. Let me clarify it. In cash in advance operations, we do not have to put all the money to the seller in the first stage. Maybe sometimes buyer can give the half of the money or quarter of the money to put a confidence, trust between the seller and buyer, the trade operations. So the trade can be complete afterwards, okay? But of course, no guarantee that goods and the goods are shipped or the services are get by the buyer. How we do that? Of course, the technology is everywhere, so we can use the wire transfer between the banks, or we can write draft or check to pay the cash. When we use that, unique, high-demand products, as I said before, buyers has no choice, have to take that good or service in the first hand. Orders from unknown buyers to produce some trust or confidence between the parties, especially from unstable countries. Let me clarify this again. When we talk about the unstable countries, for example, Turkey is also an unstable country for developed countries. For example, someone who is buying something from Turkey, from America, maybe have some questions about that the goods or the services are going to be sent to the buyer. So when we are make some transactions between or operations between this kind of unstable economic conditions countries, also sometimes the buyers has to pay the cash from the beginning of the operations. As I said before, small sample orders are ordered. Large buyers, small seller, large orders can also be happened. New relationship, small transactions. Avoid cost of documentary payments. What I mean that when we use cash in advance, there are no third parties like banks or insurance companies, etc. So there are no lots of documentaries has to be collected by the seller or the buyer. So it makes some avoid cost of this kind of documentaries as well. So cash in advance is really liquid for the market, useful, but has some disadvantages too. So what are the questions are come up for the buyer or for the seller? For the buyer, are cash advance terms the only option available? So buyer asks to himself or herself, I have to send the money to take these goods or services. Is there any options? Is there any other options? Will the seller comply with the terms and ship the goods are promised? Are they already clarified before the operation, the trade? What recourse is available if the goods are not shipped as ordered? What happens if when I send the money to the seller, but I do not get the goods or services? What should I do? Is there any legislations? Is there any laws that can protect myself from this kind of situation? And this is also another topic of the next seminar. International arbitration are this kind of organizations or this kind of concept to protect buyers and sellers, this kind of conflicts? Are there economic, political, or social instabilities in the seller's country that can avoid to send the goods or services to me? So, cash in advance is a very basic international payment method. We use it when there is small transaction, usually in new relationship between seller and buyer. Usually there are some instability, so you want to show that as a seller, take the money first hand. These are the key terms. What are the questions come up for the seller is the product unique enough or high enough demand to get away with requiring cash in advance? Seller asks these questions to himself. Is the buyer willing to pay at least some proportion in advance, as your friend's questions is related to this one? Buyer willing to pay, maybe sometimes not the whole money, maybe sometimes the small proportion of the money in advance. These are the questions for parties. What are the pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages? The advantage side, beneficial for exporters because they receive usually full money and there are no risks for the shipment on the ongoing process. No risk of non-payment from foreign buyer is associated. So there are no problem for the seller side, or it is going to be exporter. There are no problems for him or her. What are the disadvantages? Foreign buyers may be concerned about the risk of not receiving good quality. Maybe you have high demand for that good, but when you receive the good from the seller, the quality is not satisfied for you, so it is going to be a problem. Exports who consider cash in advance payment methods in international trade may lose out on business opportunities. This is also crucial. Why? Sometimes in small organizations or small businesses, they always want to take the money in the first and before operations. Okay? But this type of market or this type of trade has some potential risk of losing position in the market, because not all the buyers always want to give whole money to you before getting the goods and services. This is the most crucial disadvantages for this kind of cash in advance. So when we talk about international payment methods, also firms or the traders who are there must use different international payment methods too. Not always stick to the one method like cash in advance. Not always take all the payments from cash in advance. They must use different type of methods. Here are the diagram. Cash in advance. Exporter, seller, importer is buyer. They make a contract between them. Importer use bank wires transfer because we are in digitalized world, so we can use banks for this kind of operations. Importer, the buyer, put the money to the bank. Importer's bank transfer this money to the exporter's bank, and the exporter's bank transfer the money to the exporter. Especially for exporters, the operations actually conflict because he or she already takes his or her money. But of course, there are some responsibilities for exporters. When we talk about trade, both sides have some responsibilities. I am not talking about the law or legislation because it's trade. So he or she has to send the goods or give the services to the importer, and operation is complete. This is cash in advance diagram. Very basic. I hope that you understand the concept. The second one is, which is most common, especially in the international market, because we will also see the diagram of this letter of credit. There are third parties, issuing bank and the on-site banks are some kind of insurance, the money insurance, the goods and services. So letter of credit in Turkish akreditif, most common in the international market. So what is letter of credit? Also called documentary letters of credit. We will see in the diagram when we talk about letter of credit, if the seller wants to take money, he or she has to put some documentaries, special issues, special documents to the local bank that the operation is finished. I sent the goods to the buyer. So she or he or the company has to approve that the operation is completed by their side. And that's why also letter of credit is called documentary letters of credit. A document issued by a bank stating its commitment to pay someone, seller or exporter, a stated amount, the specific amount, provided the seller or exporter meets the specific terms and the conditions. When the seller or the exporter complete the operation of sending the goods to the buyer, importer, they have some documents, and they take these documents and go to their local bank, which is make the letter of credit with them, put the documents to the bank, and they get their money because one side finished their operations. The responsibility for exporter is giving the goods to the importer. The shipment is completed, so responsibilities are completed. They take their money. For the importer side, when they take the goods, they take documents as well to their local bank, and local bank assume that it is completed operation, so bank can pay the money for the exporter to the issuing bank for the foreign bank. Security and almost equal risks for both parties. That is why very common in international market, because the banks, the letter of credit bank, issuing bank, or the insurance company, let's say, they guarantee to finish the operations. They put the money, they put the goods to the buyer. So risks are equal for the both sides. But what are the risks for this kind of letter of credit? Of course, some risks are related about the quality of it. For example, you finish one international trade operation, you take the goods from the exporter, but the quality is not satisfied for you, not satisfying for you. So this is some kind of risk. But when we talk about operation as a whole, just the goods are received, money are transferred, so it's completed. So it is equal risk for both of the parties. Of course, there are some added costs for getting these documents from the banks or from the operations. It is also some kind of expertise for the banks, this kind of operations or transactions, letter of credit, and there are some experts who are making this kind of letter of credit. Of course, you have to pay some additional payments, this kind of operations. A bank's commitment to pay the seller a specified amount of money in letter of credit, as I said before. The buyer specified certain documents. Payment after the goods is shipped and the bank is provided the documents to the exporter. These agreements regarding the order are handled between buyer and seller independently of the banks or of payments. Each party, exporters are and importers are responsible with their local banks about this kind of operations. For example, when we talk about the importer getting some goods from foreign country with letter of credits, but do not get the goods in the term any time, the importer go to the bank which make this kind of letter of credits to take the risk this kind of operations. Of course, there are some questions come up for the buyers and sellers. For the buyer, is my bank experienced in documentary this kind of credit transactions? Because as I said before, it is a different kind of expertise. So the documents are important. The risks are has to be prepared, has to be determined before the transactions are created. So the expertise for this kind of operations fully write the documents, what are the risks, what are the amounts, what are the operations, how the operation is handled. So the buyer asks these questions to him or herself. Am I prepared to amend or renegotiate terms of credit with the sellers? Sometimes the conditions can be changed for this kind of operations. For example, you take some marbles from India in 3 months, about 2 tons, but the operations has to be delayed about the climate conditions, weather conditions. So sometimes this kind of renegotiable conditions occur. So is the buyer ready or prepared this kind of renegotiate terms of the credit? And am I certain of all the documents required for the custom clearance? Customs are also important this kind of operations because, for example, you take some products from the Europe. So when the goods are arrived to our country, Turkey, there are usually no problems about the customs. But when we talk about the third countries, except Europe, there are some legislations about the products has to be contained by themselves. So customs are when detect this kind of legislation fails, they can refuse the goods to the seller or the exporter. So it is really important that the operation is clearance about the customs. And the questions for the seller: will I take care to confirm the good standing of the buyer and the buying banks? Will I confirm that? Will we carefully review the credit to make sure its conditions can be met? Because you are responsible to complete the operation. So if you are not able to complete this kind of operations, there are some penalties for because of the letter of credit. So are you carefully review the conditions? Am I committed to properly prepare documentation for the credit? You have to be check these documents. Can we comply with every detail of the credit? When we talk about credit, there are some rules written about that credit, so you have to be comply with every detail, because when you sign this kind of letter of credits and after that you find a point which can be not comply by yourself, there are going to be problems. Am I prepared to amend or renegotiate terms of the credit as the buyer? Also ask this kind of question. What are the pros and cons? Beneficial to the exporter as they are satisfied with credit worthiness of the customer's foreign bank prior to the shipment of products. And the most important disadvantages is it is a little bit time consuming, because you have to get together collect the documents for your local bank. We will see in the diagram. So it takes some time. And afterwards, you send the goods to the buyer. It takes time. Buyer gets some documents and also present these documents to foreign bank, and then bank allow the credit to pay, etc., etc. This is going to be sometimes time consuming. So when we talk about this kind of letter of credit, the time is also related with currency and foreign exchange rates. They are both the same term, because when we talk about the time, the economic conditions can be changed and the currencies can be fluctuate. So we have to consider the currency or the foreign exchange risks, this kind of letter of credits. Do you think that in cash and advance, is there any time risk? Do you think there is a problem about time in cash and advance? No, right? Because when we talk about cash and advance, it always pays the money in the first hand, so there are no time periods, so there are no currency or foreign exchange risks. But when we talk about the letter of credits for the time period, it is going to be a problem which is handled very softly. Here is the one smaller letter of credit diagram. As you see that the different buyer and seller make sales contract again. After that, the buyer requests credit from the importer's bank, which is also called issue bank, because buyers do not want to wait for the full time while the shipment is going on. So buyer make a letter of credit with its own importer's bank or issue bank. This bank also presents these documents and send this credit demand to the exporters bank. So there are two different parties, different than buyer and seller for foreign bank and the local bank, and these two banks are issuing these operations. That's why it is a little bit more costly and time consuming. After they send the credit demand to the exporters bank give the delivered credit to the seller. Seller put the goods to the buyer, and they examine the documents. And also, while that exporter bank also presents documents which are given by the seller, and then they give the money to the buyer or refuse the demand. Here is more detailed, and also each steps are explained. Again, there is an agreement, buyer and seller agree on commercial transaction. Afterwards, buyer made an application to the issuing bank, and issuing bank issues the letter of credit to the advising bank. Advising bank authenticates the advice to the seller. Advising bank advises seller that letter of credit has been opened in his or her favor. So seller knows that buyer has to pay money. This is why these kind of operations are available in the market. When authentication advice sent to seller but not receive the money yet, seller knows that in the one point in the time he or she get the money. So he put the merchandise to the try forward, if there is. Try forward merchandise the custom broker, and custom broker merchandise the buyer. The goods are going to be sent after the authentication advice arrives, and the seller took the goods to the buyer. When the buyer has the goods, seller is going to take money from the advising bank. Letter of credit is a little bit confusing, but it is the most common used in international sales efforts for especially international trade students. I also give some documents about the letter of credit to Dr. Ozan, and he can send that document to you. It is really important to understand why. Okay, maybe you can miss something from while I am explaining this concept. Maybe you first time you are heard it in the first place yet. So. Letter of credit is really important for the international trade students. Another international trade method is documentary collection. Again, it is a little bit similar to, of course. Is it take too much time? Okay, it is 12:55. Let's say, okay, 1:05. Let's get together again, okay? Another international payment method is documentary collection. Also, it is very similar to the letter of credit. It's also equal risks for both parties. But this documentary collection is less cost and easier to use than the letter of credit, because when we talk about the documentary collection, there are no issuing banks or the advising banks between the parties. The documents are collected by exporter and seller themselves, in order by the seller to his bank to collect payment from the buyer exchange for the transfer documents, and that enable the holder to take possession of goods. So this document is kept by the buyer. Bank involved in the transactions do not guarantee payments but act only as collectors of payments. Just banks are used for the depositories for the money. In this method, seller ship goods to the buyer, to the agent by bank, and sends the documents through the bank with instructions to release them to the buyer only upon payment. Once in possession of the documents, the buyer may take the possession of the ship, and there are two different types of documentary collection. One of them is document against payment. When the payment received by when the documents are received, payments is occurred, and document against acceptance. Just there is an acceptance by the buyer, and the documents are collected for the buyer. What are the risks for seller and buyer? Different than the letter of credit. Payment is not made until after the goods are shipped, and this is risks for seller. Good can be destroyed during the transit or storage, so the bank is not guaranteed, or the authorities are not guaranteed this stage. And also bank not guaranteed the payment, because bank just give the document between the parties, do not involve in the operation by bank self. Risks for the buyer: the shipped good won't have the order quality or quantity, as we talked about before, the merchandise risk as well, because this risk is always occur in this kind of operations. The goods are not satisfied enough quality or quantity. What are the questions? For buyers, do I trust that seller will ship the quality and quantity of goods as promised? This is similar with cash in advance. In the cash in advance period, the same questions come up for the buyer. For the seller part, do I know the buyer well enough to trust that he or she will pay for the documents? They get the documents before the shipment, but the documents is not equal to the money as in cash in advance, but also show some kind of attribute that going to pay the money to the seller. So do I know the buyer? If the buyer refuses to pay for the documents, are the goods we are shipping easily marketable to another client? Because you already sent the goods to some foreign market, but you do not get the money because you do not get the documentary yet. So you can find another buyer in that foreign market. Is our company committed to prepare documents correctly? So in the letter of credits, there are expertise who are preparing this kind of documents, but in this kind of documentary collections, companies, seller or exporter, importer or exporter, are prepared themselves this kind of documents, so the documents are correct. The seller asks these questions to themselves. This method is more economical than letter of credit, but the disadvantages is there are no verification of the importer, so payment cannot be happened. And one of the other international payment method is open account. Open account is some kind of payment method created by confidence between the parties. Less risk for the buyer and the greatest risk for the seller that the buyer will not comply with the terms of contract and pay as promised. In the open account, the buyer has some account on the seller's party. Let's give you an example. For example, you make lots of transactions, lots of trades, one of the important from foreign countries, and you already had some trade between the company, let's say 3 or 4 times before. So you know that the company always pays their money in cash, let's not credit or with something for that, etc. So you have a trust for that seller. In the fifth operation, you can make an open account for the seller because you know that in some time, the seller going to pay to you. So you already sent the goods to the buyer, and when they pay the amount, a little of the full money or the full money, etc., you are going to close the open account. So the open account is some kind of operations with the trusted and long relationship traits. The seller should always consider whether any other alternatives are available because, as we know, that documentary collection and letter of credit is more guaranteed and less riskier method. The buyer has to pay for the goods within a designated time after the shipment, usually 30, 60, or 90, no longer than 180 days. So as you can see that in open account, the seller has an opportunity to pay you in a time period because you already know that the seller paid all the money before the previous operations. So receive the goods, check it, market them in his domestic market, receive payment for it, and make payment to the seller. When all this happens, the open account is occurred. How they do these operations? They can make these operations by bank draft, check, wire payment, etc. So open account, very similar to the cash in advance, but in cash in advance, you pay money at the same time when you want to when you want to buy something from the foreign market, you put the money in the first hand in cash in advance. But in open account, you have some time period to pay your debt. Not much common in international trades. Goods are shipped to the foreign branch or subsidiary of multinational company. High degree of trust between the persons, as I said before, because we open this kind of accounts to the companies or to the parties which we already have some operations previously. The seller has significant faith in the buyer's ability, willingness to pay. What are the questions come up? For the buyer, can I convince the seller of my ability and willingness to pay on an open account terms? Is my marketing or distribution strength and reputation in my domestic market attractive enough to the seller to justify open account terms? So as you can see, these questions, not all the companies have a choice to open account for the seller or for the exporter. These kinds of companies are well known in the industry and have lots of operations in the international market, and they have a common idea about these companies always pay their money. So the exporters open this kind of accounts for this kind of companies. What are the questions for seller? Are open account terms only option available? Is there any other options? For example, you can pay some of the amount in cash in advance, let's say the half of the total money, and you can open account the other side. Does the buyer have the ability and willingness to make the payments? You already know that from the previous operations because you make some operations with that buyer before. Will economic, political, and social instability in the buyer's country hinder the buyer's ability to pay? Because there is a time period, let's say for 6 days. For the buyer's country, the economic conditions can change in this kind of terms. So the beginning of the operation, company may have ability to pay this kind of amount, but after 2 months, maybe lose this kind of ability. So you have to consider this. And let me ask you a question. Do you think that in open account, is there a currency or foreign expenses? Do you think that this kind of payment method has economic and currency? Yes, right? Because there is a time period, so in time period there are always fluctuations, especially you make some operations for the developing countries or non-developed countries. What are the pros and cons? Since the importer controls the credit period, they can better manage cash flows because importers have 30 days, 60 days to pay the amount. So the importer can use that money in other operations. For exporters, this payment option can help attract customers in a competitive market. What it means? For example, in high competitive markets, you must open some accounts to the trustable buyer. You can use some potential customers. So the sellers has to open some kind of open accounts in the competitive markets. What are the disadvantages? Open account methods involve high risks for exporters because exporters has to wait to get the amount of money, 30 days, 60 days, etc. To minimize the risk, the payment mode is usually beneficial for buyers and sellers who have already established and trusting relationship. This is the keyword. Open accounts are used in international trade when the trust relationship already created between the exporter and importers. The last one is consignment credit. It is not very common. Also, there is a diagram about it. We will see in the diagram that in this kind of payment method, exporters send the goods to the importers. Importers have the goods. Importers sell the goods to the customers in their market. When the customers pay the price of these goods to importers, importers then give the money to the exporter. It is a little bit similar with open account. The differentiation part is in open account there are time periods you have to pay. But in this kind of credit or consignment payment method, the time is not detectable because we do not know when the foreign customers buy the goods from the importer. Okay, we will see in the diagram. What are the pros and cons? The advantage part is this method is more competitive and reduces direct cost of storing and managing inventory. Why? If we use this kind of payment method in international markets, the importers do not buy too much goods for their inventory. Why? Because the importers wait to sell those goods to the customer in their own market. So they always take the amount where the customer demand is satisfied in their home countries. Okay? What is the disadvantages? There is lack of access to the end of management merchandise and no guarantee payment after the sales to the exporter. We do not know that the importer put enough effort to buy those goods on their market. We do not know that because we wait to sell those goods on their market. And also we do not know that the importer pay the payment to us. This is the risk for this kind of payment method. Here is a diagram. This is more simplified for you. Exporter sell the goods to the importer during no payment. Importer sell the goods to the end customer, the customer in the local market or the importer market. Customer pays the money to the importer, and importers are then give the money to the exporter. So again, this is kind of open account, but the time period is not clarified clearly and more riskier than the open account. So what are the key points of payments? International trade always contains some kind of risk, especially for the time period. For example, inflation advance, the risk just all by the importer. Because importers need the money, but do not know that the goods are going to be sent. Also, the risk is related to timing of payments. For example, in open account, there is 36 days. In credit, there is a period. Also, in letter of credit or the legislation processes, there are some time for getting the money or the goods. So, when we talk about the time makes this unbelievable proportion of this kind of payments. For exporters, when sale is a gift, unpayment is received. This is also a motto for international trade. When you are going to work for international companies, you are going to work in international markets, all exporters, unpayment is a gift because you send to it. You have goods, but you do not have any money yet. Therefore, exporters want to receive payment as soon as possible. Orders placed or before the goods are sent to the importer, there are some options. For importers, any payment is a donation until the goods are received. This is a controversial trade for this. Therefore, importers want to receive the goods as soon as possible, but delay payment as long as possible. This is similar in the local market too. When we talk about local market, local trade, these key points also similar. Here is the risk diagram. When we talk about cashing advance for importer who is give the money in first hand, this is the least secure one. It means that high risk. Letter of credit is less risky than cashing advance. It is similar for the importer. As you can see that letter of credit similar to the exporter. Open account is most secure for the importer because there is already a trust relationship between exporter and importer. And a same as in consumer, we also depend on the trust for the between parties. Another diagram for buyer. For seller, cash in advance is the most risk protected payment method and it goes on like this. For example, for seller, open account is the most riskier because you do not know when the money is going to be given. So the risk protection is minimum. This chart is risk protection, so that's why there is controversy between the diagram. So how we choose the right payment method for export success? We have to know that cash flow availability and needs. For example, can we make cash advance payments about our company? Is it okay for our company? Can we do that? And what are the legal themes, import and export regulations? Maybe some industries have to be used letter of credit payments, like energy. Type of product is important. Let's say the small marbles, the big marbles are different than the hands or the small rooms. Credit workers of export and import is important. Why? Because when we talk about the letter of credit, it is also related to the credibility of exporters and importers. Not all the exporters and importers can make letter of credit payments in the international market because there are banks. Those banks are evaluating these importers and exporters. Afterwards, they make letter of credits for this kind of players in the market. And last one is competitors offering. What are the other options? For example, for the seller, what are the other buyers give you? For example, there are 3 or 4 buyers in the market. One of them is give you cash in advance option. Of course, you are going to directly sell your goods to him or her. So, competitor offering is important. And all these circle diagram makes the right payment method for you. Of course, when we talk about international trades, there are lots of risks. Also, it is differentiated from the local market. There is transport risks and tourist risks. Transport is also in the local market, but when we talk about international trade in the world, approximately 75% of the international logistics are made on seas. So, when we talk about seas, there are lots of different weather conditions. So, transport risks are higher in international trade market. Also, we are using different currencies between these transactions. For example, you sell something to China, not currently you use dollar or euro. little bit. Product risks are the quality of the product. Manufacturing risks are when we talk about some components of the products are important. Manufacturing risks are related with the components of the product because when we buy some products with different components, and in the market you cannot reach those components easily because it comes from foreign country. So manufacturing risks are occurred in this kind of operations. Transport risks I already mentioned. And this seminar is related with currency or foreign exchange risk. So we will talk about currency risks. Let me ask you another question. If you are in international market, which currency are you going to use? Turkish lira, Indian rupee, euro, dollar, euro, but yes, they are more stable. They are more trustable currencies. The fluctuations in this kind of currencies are very low relative to other currencies. So, especially in international market, yes, lots of the transactions are used in dollars or euros, more stable currencies. But in the international market, each exporters want to use their own currency because the own currency can be getting more easily from the market. But the foreign currency is another. That's why in international market, nearly all the exporters want to use their local currencies. But in the international market, it is not possible because the other sides, the importers, want to minimize the currency risks. That's why the euros or dollars are more common currency. Also, sometimes countries make some agreements about this kind of international trade. For example, I remember that Russia and the European Union with an agreement about that. Europe made the gas bill or the amount for the energy money in Russian rubles to the Russia. So some kind of agreements can be happened in international market. Currency risk management is also misunderstood or neglected by business. They do not consider these risks in the person. Any business that purchases and sells products in multiple currencies should consider options to mitigate foreign exchange rate volatility. Maybe you purchase and sell in Turkish lira, you make business in Turkey, but you sell this product to Africa, Asia, or another side of the world. So you have to use different currencies. For example, you make agreement with euros in the European Union, but you make sometimes trade between other countries in dollars. So you have to consider foreign exchange rate volatility. Changes in exchange rates will impact profit margin. It is really simple to understand. For example, in Turkey, last 2 or 3 years, there are a debt and currency in our economy. The Turkish lira is depreciated about 2 or 4 times. 3 years ago, $1 is 8 lira approximately, but now $1 is approximately 44 or 5 Turkish lira. So this is the change in the currency. So when you make some international payments like open account, you are going to pay your money 3 months later. When you start the operations, 1 Turkish lira, let's say, $1, let's say 10 Turkish lira. But after 3 months, Turkish lira is going to depreciate and going to be 15 lira for $1. So that will say that I am going to pay you $1 million 3 months later. In the first time, you are going to pay 10 million Turkish lira because exactly this is 1 time. After 3 months, you have to pay 15 million Turkish lira because exchange rate becomes 150. This is the risk for the company because you have to find 5 million Turkish lira as a local company in Turkey. Or you have to use some hedge options in the international market we are going to play. margin of international contracts, as well as the value of any assets, liabilities, and cash flows which are denominated in foreign currency. So when you put a price for your goods when you are exporting to the other countries, you do not give the real or nominal price for that in that time period. You have to be considered that there is a time period when the operation is finished. You have to consider this time period for giving the reference price for your goods. This is the risk posed by fluctuations in exchange rate, as I told you. That will affect payments and receipts in foreign currencies because in international market, most of the Turkish companies always get their monies or pay their monies in dollars or euros. Unless such risk is hedged, a trader or exporter has no control over the effect of exchange rate volatility in worst case scenario. This kind of volatility wipe out the entire profit and your company can be bankrupt. So how to mitigate this kind of risk in international trade? For business aiming to expand in market reach beyond national borders, you have to have a deep understanding of these risks are crucial. Effective mitigation strategies are essential not only for minimizing potential risks, also for ensuring sustained success in the volatile environment. The first step to developing and implementing an effective currency exchange risk management strategy starts with understanding what they are and how they form the very foundation of international trade. So when we are talking about international trade, or when you are going to work for international companies in the future, you are not just focused on the operation of importing your money or exporting your goods. You always keep in your mind there are risks about the currency. You have to put a reference price with the currency. You have to have these kinds of risks for your operations. International traders are always keep these crucial risks in their mind. To effectively manage this kind of risks, we have to find what are the currency risks and what are the subtopics. One of the transaction risks is related with time. You make $1 million agreements when the exchange rate is 1 to 10, but your payment is going to be 3 months later and the exchange rate is changed. This is related to transaction risk. There is also translation risk. It is not talk about the word or grammar. We are not talking about that kind of risk. Each Turkish company has to manage account documentary in Turkish. Maybe you all your operations are export and all your operations are made in dollars. All your transactions are dollars, but in Turkey, most of the countries are like this. In Turkey, you have to make your account documents in Turkish lira. So, for example, the first month you make $1 million operation, you make $1 million. In the first month of the year, you take $2 million or you take in 6 months, etc., in 12 months, etc., etc. So you have always translate this kind of operations to your currency. So each translation has some potential currency for whom this is called translation currency, more related with account documents and also economic risks. For example, in Ukraine, there is a war between Russia and Ukraine. So these both risks create an economic risk in the country. So these economic risks or economic crisis put some exchange fluctuations for the Ukraine's local currency. And these kind of economic risks also make currency risks for the international trades. Here is transaction risk, a critical aspect of currency exchange rate management occurs when there are fluctuations in the exchange rate between the time the transaction is agreed upon and time is settled. I mean that the transaction agreed this time. Transaction is settled 3 months later. This is called transaction. This risk can have significant financial implications for business as the exchange rate risk. Understanding transaction risks involves recognizing its potential impact on cash flow and profits. There is also an example. But when we understand there is currency risks related by transaction risk and we calculate that roughly, 3 months later you have to find 5 million Turkish lira also to close your open account in the previous scenario. And this example, this can highlight the importance of proactive finance to mitigate such risks. So you can control this kind of risks. The second one is translation risk, also as accounting exposure, as I give you an example, because each local countries have to put their accounting documents in their local currencies. So in a whole year, there is a translation problem, so you have to consider this kind of risks. There is impact on financial statement. For example, let's say that your currency is appreciated very high. In the beginning of the year, 1 Turkish lira is 10, $1 is 10 Turkish lira. At the end of the year, 1 lira is 5 Turkish, $1 is 5 Turkish lira. So your Turkish lira is overtime. So it shows you that if you are making operations in dollars, you get too much money from the outside of the country, right? Because $1 is 10 Turkish lira, at the end of the year, $1 is 5 Turkish lira. So this kind of effects impact on financial statements. It shows you more profitable. In the reality, there is no profitability actually. Also, to avoid this kind of translation risk, we use some accounting standards. Most probably the business administration students already have some knowledge about accounting standards. But I hope that the international trade students also have some accounting lessons. If you do not have this kind of lectures or lessons, I suggest you to take at least basics of accounting to understand this kind of operations and risks in the market. Also, translation risks have some operational impacts. For example, significant change in the reported earnings due to currency fluctuation might affect a company's investment decisions or dividend policies. This is a little bit related with company management. A whole year is passed and you look at your financial statements. Because of the fluctuations, you misunderstand your financial statement. You think that you have too much profit, but in reality, it is directly related with the currency fluctuations, but you do not consider that. So you make some operational decisions which is not correct for your company. So there is also operational impact about translation risk. Avoid this kind of operational impact. You have regular monitoring and reporting for your actions. The last one is more clear for you, economic risk and global competition. Economic risk driven by fluctuations in exchange rates that include international purchasing power parity. So when economic crisis arise, that countries lose their some sort of power purchasing parity. So you have to regenerate your operations for those countries. For Turkish businesses aiming to treat in an environment of international competition, strategically managing this type of risk is crucial for sustaining profitability. Why? Because in Turkey, Turkish lira fluctuates too much against dollar or euros, more common currencies which are used in the market. So in Turkish international traders, exporters or importers, have to make too much effort to understand these fluctuations effects on their operations. So what kind of tools, or are there any tools that can avoid this kind of risk? Of course, there are some tools, and we call it hedge in English. One company understands the intricacies of currency exchange risks. They are better positioned, and for this kind of positions, companies are using hedging instruments. And these hedging instruments are, maybe you already heard that, there are specifically 3 or 4 of them is important. It is not seen clearly, but spot contract is important. Options, there are some options. For these 4 instruments are really common in the market, and when the companies use these instruments for their operations, they can mitigate the risks or lower the risks for their operations, this kind of currency risks. And I will explain you one by one, and we will finish that. Forward contract is customized contract between 2 parties, importer and exporter. Specified price on a future date. So let's back to our open account example. Now we take an open account with an exporter. We will give the money 3 months, but we do not know what the Turkish lira fluctuates in 3 months later. So we already set the price for this transaction. For example, we know that Turkish lira is going to be depreciated, so but we do not know which amount is going to happen. One Turkish lira cash is present, but 3 months later we do not know that where it is going. So in the first case, we make a forward contract and put the price of it, let's say that 1 to 2 hours. So it has this kind of problem. Future is very similar to forward, but future has some obligations. In forward, when you make some forward contract, you do not have to obey this contract. You can just but when you talk about the future, you have to obey the rule. So this is the basic difference between these kind of contracts. In both contracts, you put a future price for your operations, but you do not have to make these contracts or hedge instruments with the operation parties. I mean that you do not have to make these contracts with importer between exporter. Maybe you can make this kind of contracts with the third party. Let's give you an example. You send marbles to the Croatia, let's say, a company there, and there is a fluctuation in your market in Turkish lira, but you want to cover your kind of so you can make forward or future in the patient markets. There's some kind of patient market for buying. You make a forward out that you said that I am going to take 1 million for 3 months with this price. Someone who is going to take this market, maybe you will not part of this. That you can cover yourself from the currency risks. So let's clarify. Forward and futures are some of the hedge instruments for international trade. But these contracts do not have to make it between export and import. Okay. Also, there is some hope that companies put some money to the hedge fund, which lower this kind of fluctuations. And so there is some there also in options, the amount of the goods are specified, time is specified, the total currency, the last price is specified, and more complex version of futures and forwards. Also, you can make some currency diversification. It means that, for example, you make some operations between Turkey and European Union, euros, and also you make operations with China in Chinese yuan. So it makes you cover yourself from the fluctuations between euro fluctuation and yen fluctuation. Because I always give the Turkish lira example because Turkish lira is really fluctuating currency, but other currencies are also fluctuating. So when we are making operations in international markets, as well as the local currency fluctuating is important, also the foreign currency fluctuations are important too. So with currency diversification, when the company makes local operations in international markets with different countries, with different currencies, it makes a diversification. So it covers from foreign currency fluctuations better. Do you have any questions about the managing risk of currencies or how to mitigate this kind of risk? Do you have any questions about that? You have to know that in international trade there are different methods, because different methods make you find different customers. Because if you stick your payment method in one option, the other customers who are going to negotiate with you can be lost, because they cannot maybe pay cash in advance, they can pay different methods. So international market, international trade, different methods. So when we talk about international payment methods, always time can be applied to our operation. So when we talk about time takes fluctuations in currency, and this currency makes some risk. So we have to take this kind of currency in our operation. And these are the forward futures from contracts. So currency diversification methods is an excellent instrument that can cover from currency risk. These just 5 sentences or 6 sentences are the summary of this seminar. If you do not have any questions, I want to end this session. And if you know that there is some application, I want to make another application. Okay? Thank you very much. So let's make fun. And try to evaluate ourselves that how we understand these concepts. It is sometimes a little bit hard to understand in the first time. Is everybody know what is Kahoot? If you do not know, Kahoot is a mobile application, also web application. I made some questions, true and false, and two questions. On the screen, there is going to be shown a pin code. You can use your cell phones and enter the website of kahoot.it. When you go to that website, there is a need to enter this pin code to your screen, and then you can see the answers on your phone, and you just click the right answer to yourself, and we will keep going on. Here is the pin code. Ömer, welcome. Aida is so cool with sunglasses. Is there anyone trying to connect still? Or can we start? Okay. Who goes? Okay? I'm starting, okay? First questions are true, false. Last 5 seconds. 50-50. Cash in advance, you direct the payment in the first hand, so it is least riskier for the seller, okay? Seller already get the money in the first hand. Yaya is number 1 now. In open account, seller gives some time period to the buyer to pay the amount of the goods for the goods. So there must be high level of trust between the buyer and seller. This is a typical Turkish university exam question. You put the contradictive phrase in the question, there is a law, and make the opposite answer in the answer set. Yeah, keep going on. In letter of credit, there are issuing and advising banks, which is covering the whole period. So it guarantees the getting goods and getting money for both parties. Yes, bravo. Yes, the consequent payment method allows the exporter to retain ownership of the goods until they are sold by distributors. It is a little bit complicated question. Cash in advance payments are most common in well-established business relationships because in cash in advance, the buyer do not know that the goods will send to him or her. Letter of credit can be time-consuming and costly due to the involvement of banks. Yes. Hedging instruments like forward contracts can help businesses mitigate currency risks, right? Bravo. Currency risk only affects businesses that trade in a single foreign currency. Currency risk only affects businesses that trade in a single foreign currency. Like company makes businesses with Turkish companies, just make use Turkish lira in all operations. Maybe you complicate about that because if there is just single currency that you make business with that, like just say that maybe my question is not so correct order. The main risk for the seller in an open account transaction is the potential non-payment by the buyer. This main risk is always the main risk for all kind of international payments. Bravo. Selling your pest. Regular credit typically involve multiple banks, including issuing and advising banks. We already asked this question in different words. Bravo. Economic risk in currency exchange refers to short-term fluctuations in exchange rates during a single transaction. Is economic risk related to short-term fluctuations or not? Not. Managing currency risk is unnecessary if a company only deals with stable currencies like US dollar. Here are the questions like 5 of them. What is the primary advantage of using a letter of credit in international trade? It is the cheapest payment method. It reduces the need for documentation. It guarantees the payment upon meeting specified conditions. It does not involve banks. Primary advantage. One last answer is waiting. It guarantees it is not the cheapest payment method. Why? Because the expertise is needed in making letter of credits, so it makes cost for the importers and exporters. In which scenario would an open account be most appropriate for open account? High risk markets, new customer relationship, unstable political environments, transactions with trusted long-term buyers, open accounts, most appropriate. Yes. With new customer relationship, you do not know yet the payment is going to happen. And high risk market, maybe you make some relation between the competitive market and high risk market. Maybe that's why you answered that question in high risk markets. Salinio or Ömer? Which of the following is not a method of mitigating currency risk? Forward contracts, future contracts, currency diversification, or just ignoring exchange rate fluctuations? Maybe you just ignore them. şey gibi yani. Mart, Nisan'a bakmak, Mayıs, Nisan'a. Just ignore it. Forward contract, future contract, and currency diversification is used for covering yourself from currency risks, which is not a method of mitigating currency risks. Ignoring exchange rate fluctuation, you just ignore that. So you cannot cover yourself. Let's check it later, okay? What does hedging refer to in the context of currency risk management? What does selling goods at lower price, using financial instruments to protect against exchange rate fluctuations, borrowing funds in a foreign currency, ignoring currency risks. What does hedging refer in the context of currency risk management? Oh, studying your test. Which factor is most crucial in deciding the payment method in international trade? Product packaging, advertising strategy, line of business relationship, weather conditions. Yes. Yes, weather condition is also important, but not the most crucial one. The last question, I think. Yes, the last question. What is transaction risks in the context of international trade? The risk of currency value change between agreement and payment, the risk of damage to goods during shipment, the risk of delays in customs clearance, the risk of legal disputes over contracts. Transaction risk. Yes. Let's see the results. The third one, Asma. Congratulations. Ömer. And Oscar goes to Salinio. Bravo. So I hope you enjoyed the lecture, this seminar, and I hope we will be together in the next week again. If you have any questions for me, my email address is karademir@gmail.com. Let me show you. Here it is. You can send any email about this kind of topics or anything you want to get an answer about any topic. You can send me an email. Yes, I will share with Dr. Ozan, and I hope he will be with the other supplementary. So thank you very much for your attention. Okay.